All right, so before we start with going around the world, I want to talk to you a bit about what I've been doing as an archaeologist. I don't know if you are familiar with archaeology as a field. If you have you ever seen an archaeological excavation before? Anyone? No one has seen an archaeological excavation? Okay. Do you know an archaeologist by any chance? Any of you? Yes, no?
No.
No, no one. Okay. So I think the first few slides of the presentation are going to be useful because not everyone knows exactly what it means to be an archaeologist, and most of the time I get questions like, "What do you do in your day-to-day life?" Oh, okay. So we have someone that has an uncle that his uncle is an archaeologist, so it's really good. And someone else that also knows about archaeology. So one of the main things really that we do in archaeology is excavation. So you probably know this. We always think about an archaeological dig, an archaeological excavation. And the main idea behind the excavation is that anything that lies beneath your feet whenever you're walking is potentially hiding something more, and is hiding some traces of past cultures and civilization. So in these pictures here, you actually have, okay, so more people that have families or friends, they are archaeologists, so it's really good. There's lots of us. So the three pictures that you see here on the screen, it's me excavating in 3 different sites. And one of the things that I love the most about excavating and archaeology is that actually gives you a chance to travel the world if you want. And you can go all over the places to excavate. So the first picture is me in Italy excavating Iron Age grave, which is probably about 2,000 years old. And then the other picture here where I have kind of a group picture that's been taken in India, where I've been excavating a settlement, so a village that was about 5,000 years old. And then the last picture I am actually at the entrance of a cave, if you can see, and we're kind of brushing the soil. Don't know if you see. Over there we were excavating again some Iron Age settlements in Norca in Spain. So this is definitely one of the main activities that we do as archaeologists. But then another thing that I ended up doing a lot is kind of specializing in physical anthropology, which is a very big word really, but what it means is basically studying the human bones and the skeletons to know more about that individual's life. So you can see on one of the pictures, there's one individual that I was actually analyzing for my master's dissertation. I did my master's at Durham University, and they have a really wonderful course there in physical anthropology where they teach you all the tricks that you need to know in order to read so much information on the bones. So we can tell, for example, if a person was male or female. We can tell how old they were when they passed away. We can tell if they were suffering from any chronic diseases, for example. And yeah, there's a lot of information that actually can be gained from the study of human remains. So this is another part of my job. So I also deal with human bones. And then another part, which is the most kind of recent part of my job, is dedicated to studying what people ate in the past. And the way to do this is using what is through a technique that is called stable isotope analysis. So again, it's a bit of a difficult word. It kind of implies a lot of chemistry, but really what it means is just that we are measuring the content of some specific elements in the bones of the past people. And whenever we have a certain values, then we can reconstruct their diet. So what you can see here in the first picture, I am actually drilling through a piece of bone, and that is because I needed to sample a very tiny piece in order to do the analysis later on here in Barcelona. I was in Brazil there in February, sampling there at the museum. So we don't need much material at all. So usually we need about 1 centimeter, which is about 1 gram of bone, which is really not much. Is probably the size of, I don't know, like a bit of your finger. And from that little piece of bone, we can really reconstruct what, like, so much information. And in this case, what I am interested in is what people ate in the past. So after sampling the bone, here's a kind of a very fast video where you see me cleaning a rib. And we kind of make sure that we clean the surface. So obviously it has been, you know, buried for centuries or thousands of years, so it can be contaminated. So we clean the surface as much as we can with a blade, and then we follow all the necessary steps of the protocol to extract the protein that we need to analyze to reconstruct diet. So that's, again, another big part of my job at the moment as an archaeologist. And then just last week, so I kind of added this slide just literally a couple of days ago, I've been starting to work with 3D laser scanning. And I don't know if any of you can see what I'm scanning there. Can you guess? Can you see? I don't know if you can zoom enough. It's really tiny. What could it be? Anyone? It's a tooth. So this is the 3D model that came out of the scanning. It's not a particularly good resolution because it was the first one, so we're still trying to work out how we can have a better resolution. But the really nice thing about this kind of digital technology applied to archaeology is that once we have a really good model, it does, well, we can kind of we will destroy this tooth with the analysis, and so we want to preserve as much information as possible of how the tooth looked like before we destroy it, obviously. And these models can be manipulated. You can zoom in, you can zoom out, you can take measurements. So it's a really nice kind of preservation tool also for the future. And it actually looks really cool. It looks like I am, you know, like I have a sort of a laser gun or something, you know. I look like a superman, superwoman. I really liked it. Okay, so now we can do it two ways. I would rather that you would kind of unmute yourself and give me the answer, just because I can see only, I think, 5 of you when I'm presenting. I can see only 5 faces on the side because there's not much space on my screen. And it is a bit weird for me to see the chat. So if you could answer the question, if you know it, just by kind of, you know, chip in. So unmute yourself and then tell me what you think. But if you don't feel comfortable, you can also type in the chat, just, you know, see what you feel like. So these are all the archaeological superpowers. Probably there will be more, but these are probably my favorite ones. So the first superpower is that the archaeologists have is that we can see through soil. So literally what lies beneath our feet, what is it that we are stepping on? So do you know what is this superpower called? Anyone? You can try. No?
It could be a ground-penetrated radar.
Wow, that's really good. There is one of the techniques, and it's very, very specific. So thank you very much, Erin. This is one of the techniques that we use to actually see what lies beneath our feet. But the general field that includes all these techniques that allow us to see through the soil is actually called geophysics. And the ground penetrating radar is one of them. So yeah, very well done. Okay, so next superpower is read a person's diet through their bones, teeth, and hair. I kind of already said this, if you're paying attention. What is this called?
Is it physical anthropology?
Kind of. But more specifically is the isotopic analysis. So the one where I was cutting, you know, the slides where I was cutting bones, you know, to analyze what people were eating. Okay, so then the next one, I didn't talk about it yet, so you might just have to guess, so I can just tell you straight away. So tell where a person is from is, again, isotopic analysis. But the difference between the diet reconstruction and the geographic origin reconstruction is actually the type of elements that we're looking for. So to reconstruct diet, we're looking at carbon and nitrogen. It won't mean much to you at the moment, I know it's just names, but just so you can, you know, have it in your head. So to look at diet, we'll look at the content of carbon and nitrogen in your bones. And to look at where you're from, we're looking at different elements. So oxygen and strontium, this is how they're called. Okay, so then the next one is identify animal remains. So if you think about being in an excavation, you will have a lot of fragments of animal remains because that's what people ate, you know, they ate animals and then they just kind of throw away the scrap food. And that's what archaeologists then find very often, especially when we excavate cities or villages. There's lots of rubbish everywhere. They were not that good in recycling, not that good in, you know, putting all the rubbish in the same place. So we find lots of kind of scrap food everywhere. So then there will be, you know, you will need a specialist that know how to recognize these animal remains and identify them and tell you, okay, this is a dog, this is a horse, this is a cattle, for example. Do you know what is this called? And try your luck. No? Okay, so, oh, sorry, this is wrong order. Sorry, let me go back. Okay, so I thought this one was the next, but it's not, apparently. So, okay, so the next one, I think, Peter, you already said it. So tell the sex and age of a skeleton by looking at it. That is physical anthropology. Then assess the health of a skeleton by looking at it. Again, anyone? This should be easy now. Still the same one. Or paleopathology. So paleo stands for old and pathology stands for disease or illness. So paleopathology means literally the study of past disease. And then what if I want to know where a person's ancestors were from? First of all, do you know what ancestors mean? Yeah, I can see some nodding. Okay, that's good.
Genealogy?
So, say it again.
Is it genealogy?
Yes, I guess it could be as well, but the specific type of analysis that we do to tell where people, like where your ancestors are from. You probably heard this. There are lots of people that are doing this type of analysis now to know where their family is from, if they migrated from somewhere else, if they were
DNA.
Vikings. Yes, exactly. Yes, say DNA analysis. It's really on fashion now, and it seems like everyone is 3% Neanderthal, and you know, there's always some Viking, you know, Viking percentage, apparently. Okay, so the last two, okay, one I already said it. So the one for the identifying animal remains is actually called zooarchaeology, which is a bit of a funny word, but it's because zoo means animal, and so it's the archaeology of animals. And then identifying plant remains, anyone has any idea? No? Archaeobotany. This was a bit of a hard one. Okay, so because this is kind of an overview of all the superpowers that that archaeologists have. So this is all the things that we can do in archaeology, and that's so much information that you can get actually through all these specialties. And you're not going to have one person that knows how to do all of these things. So we kind of share the superpowers. So I have about 3 or 4 of these superpowers. I think I'm pretty good at the moment. But it's very hard to have all of these superpowers because obviously every single one of these technique, you know, takes time to learn and takes time to practice. So yeah, so it will be very hard to find someone that is a specialist in all of these fields. Okay, now we are starting our round the world trip, and at this point you're gonna lead traveling really. So I'm only going to click on the PowerPoint because I can do it for you, but you're going to decide where we're going. So we're going to go to 4 different places in the world. We have the UK, we have Turkey, which is the one in green, number 3. We have Mexico, which is number 1. And then we have Peru, which is number 2. This is the time where I'm going to need you to type in the chat which number you would like to go first. So which country you would like to go first. Number 1, number 2, number 3, or number 4. Okay. 2, 1, 1, 3. Okay, I'm just gonna go and see what's the majority more or less. Okay, I think we have a lot of 2. So I think we're gonna go to 2 first. I think so. Aaron really wants to go to Mexico. I can see a lot of 1. Okay, no, there's more 1 coming in now. Okay, 1. It's a winner. Okay, so number 1. And we are flying to Teotihuacan, Mexico. So welcome to Mexico, everyone. In Teotihuacan, you're going to see these great pyramids, which are shown in the picture in front of you. This was the largest city in the Americas and one of the largest in the world, with around 100,000 residents. And we are speaking of a chronology of about 1 to 650 of the Common Era. So about 2,000 years ago. So we have lots of open questions for this site. So obviously, if you are an archaeologist, these were not uncovered. These were uncovered. Obviously, were not buried in soil because they stand out quite a lot. So if you are an archaeologist approaching this site, you will have lots of questions. And there are several theories of why the largest city in the world at this time ended, because all of a sudden it just ended. So it was obviously very rich if they had all these resources to build such structures, and then all of a sudden it kind of ended. And some of the theories that archaeologists came up with, they said, oh, it's because there are some foreign invasions, so there are some population from elsewhere that they come and they just conquer everything, and that's why it kind of ended the civilization there. They're thinking about a civil war, an ecological disaster. So for example, they just, I don't know, cut all the trees and they didn't have any more resources. Or some people did just say, I think it's probably a combination of all these 3 ideas all at the same time. So some of the questions that really were faced as archaeologists, but even just if you're curious, if you have a curious mind, if you see these big structures anywhere, you probably want to know who built it, who went all these efforts to build these like huge pyramids, why they built it, again, why so much, putting so much effort and resources in this, and also more generally speaking, who lived there, what sort of people were living there, and why was it abandoned? So why so much richness was concentrated at this site and then it kind of disappeared. I have more people. Okay, Aztec, Mayan. They're not actually. The Teotihuacan people are predating the Incas and the Mayans and the Aztec. So when this population from Central America arrived in Teotihuacan, they already found the pyramids there. And they were like, oh, wow, someone left this here. Someone forgot pyramids. They didn't, they go away and they didn't pack them with them. So this is one of the questions, actually, because we don't know what happened. And when Incas and Mayas and Aztec come and arrive to these places, the pyramids are already completely empty. So there's no one else living there. Not anymore. Okay, so let's look at what archaeologists know about this site and what they found when they excavated. So they know that the pyramids were a religious center. We also find lots of offerings near the pyramids and also in the tunnels underneath it. So when I talk about offering, what type of offering do you think we could find on a site? What sort of thing would you offer if you had to make an offering? Anyone? You can type if you want, but I'm not seeing any message coming through, or you can just...
Humans?
Human offering, yes, actually in this site, yes, we have human offering. What else? It's a bit less dramatic.
Animal sacrifices?
Yeah, exactly. Animal remains, yes. What else?
Riches?
Say it again?
Riches?
I'm not sure I got that. Anyone?
Gold and that. Gold, diamonds.
Gold, yes. Yes, anything, so anything that has value to you. So you can put food and animal remains. Obviously, you can put metals and diamonds and gold. So anything that has a value for you and you're offering to the gods, that will make for a good offering. We also know that people were coming from all parts of Mexico. So people from Teotihuacan were not just, were born there and living there and died there and just never moved, but they were actually coming from all over Mexico. Some were moving during their childhood, and some when they were already grown up. So we have kind of different moments of migration. And we also found some high status individuals. So what does it mean? That we found, for example, a woman with a lot of objects, stones in her teeth, which is the picture that you can see here, probably coming from somewhere else in Mexico, and that is because of the shape of the head of the head shape, because there are some other groups in Mexico that they wear some really tight bands around their head, and they modify slightly the shape of their head. And it's a cultural practice. So this woman had lots of stones, she had lots of diamonds and metals and precious objects, and also her head looked slightly different because of this practice of binding the head when kids are small. And so she was probably coming from somewhere else. Do you know what is the green stone that she has instead of one of her tooth there in the front? Anyone? Can you think of any green stone? Jade, emerald, a filling.
Is
Yeah.
it jade?
Jade. Yes, it is jade, so well done, everyone. And one of the really spectacular findings from this site is that they even found traces of makeup in small vessels, so small containers with makeup in it. And they are the first proof of the use of cosmetics in the Mesoamerican history. I don't know if any of you have, you just woke up one day and you wondered, when is it that people started using makeup? It's actually a really nice question. It's like, when is it that people started, applying all sorts of things, onto their faces so they can look prettier? And these sorts of substances, obviously they don't preserve very well. So this is why it's one of very, unique and fantastic finding. Okay, I told you a lot of information about Teotihuacan, so now I'm going to quiz you. That's when I need you to type down your answer. So the question is here, and it goes: travelers from all over Mexico, offerings and religious monuments and very expensive items like makeup were found in Teotihuacan. What does this mean? A, the city was conquered by different people that brought all these objects. B, people came only to stay for a little time and then they left. C, the city was an important religious and trade center and attracted people from various places. Okay, so I'll give you a couple of seconds to answer. I can see the answers coming through. Lots of C's. No one wants B or A, yeah. Okay, so it seems pretty unanimous here. Some people feel really strongly about this C. They put lots of C. Okay, so if everyone voted. Okay, so let's see. Yes, well done. The city was an important religious and trade center and attracted people from various places. So that's really good. Okay, so now we're going back to the beginning. And I need you to choose the next destination. So we went to Mexico now. Where do you want to go next? Let's see. Oh, it's a lot of two. It's a lot of two coming through. If you don't want two, you better type. Lots of people, you don't know. Okay, I think two is definitely getting the majority of the votes. So we will fly. Whoop, sorry. Sorry, my hyperlink didn't work. Okay, so we will fly to Peru. Okay, so welcome to Peru. We are traveling in space, but we're also traveling in time, because if you look here, the chronology, we're actually much closer to present day. So the first site that we went to in Mexico, it was between 1 and 600 of the Common Era. And this one is actually 1450 to 1520 of the Common Era as well. So 15th to 16th century. And the site that I'm going to talk about is Machu Picchu, which was built around 1450. It is considered to be a royal estate. I don't know if any of you have ever visited a royal estate of the English royal family, but this is the equivalent of the Machu Picchu royal estate for Peru at the time. Unfortunately, it was only used for approximately 80 years before being abandoned as well, seemingly due to destruction because of the Spanish conquest. So in the 15th century, Spain started to travel all over the world and kind of setting colonies, very similar to what will be the English Empire as well. And so because of the Spanish conquest, they think that that what is causing the destruction of this site. And it is possible that most of its inhabitants died from smallpox, which was introduced by travelers before the Spanish conquistadors arrived in the area. So unfortunately, a lot of the people that traveled from Europe were carrying with them some diseases that were not known in the Americas. So one of the problems of these first travels to South America is that, of course, lots of the indigenous population died because of this. They didn't have an immune system which was ready for these bacteria and these pathologies that were coming from Europe. So again, you have to imagine this site is built on top of a mountain. It's very, very hard to get there. And again, the questions are still the same. So why it was built? Again, why would you bother to go and build an entire city on the top of a mountain? It's such just a very uncomfortable place. And you have to carry all those stones with you, and go up and bring water for the people that are working there and bring food for the people that are building, okay? And so the next question will be how also was maintained, because you have to repair it from every now and then. You have to feed the people there. Who lived there, and why was it abandoned? So what do we know from the excavation, really, from the archaeologist report? So the city is a fortress on top of a mountain and was completely independent. So that meant that food, animals, and water were present in the city at all times. That means they didn't need to leave the city for too long or very often in order to get hold of these resources. And the city has more than 150 buildings with stairs and terraces, and the planning must have taken a few years really to accommodate on top of the mountain, which is, quite steep, 150 buildings, a bit of like a jigsaw. And building were prepped for earthquakes, because Peru is a place where you get a lot of earthquakes. And even in the 15th centuries, these people living in Machu Picchu, they knew this, and they prepared, they built all these structures for earthquakes. So the population was found to be mainly non-local, being born from other parts of the Andes, and food was also imported from a really wide area. Okay, now it's time for the next question. People decide to build a huge city on top of a steep mountain. The city was self-sufficient. It had water, food, and animals, and lots of trade coming from all over Peru. Why and who lived there? So A, Inca people built this city as a retreat for the royal and high-status family to protect them from Spanish invasion. B, Inca people did not want to mix with other population, that's why they just went up there. Or C, Inca people loved the view from the top. Let's see. Are you actually thinking for yourself, or if the first person that types A, then everyone else is just going to say A? Because this is very dangerous, The if the first person gets it wrong, then all of you are going to just copy each other. Just saying, it's better if you think for yourself. I don't know who is drawing. I don't know. A, did everyone voted? Not yet. You really feel strongly about your answers. Typing lots of A's. Okay, so let's see. Yes, it was A. Well done, everyone. Yeah, it was A. All right, so we are back in our map. Where do you want to go next? We did Central and South America. Now we have the UK, number 4. And then Turkey, number 3. Okay, there's lots of 3. If people want 4, they have to type. I can see lots of 3. Yeah, I'm sorry, it's 3. It's definitely number 3. Okay, so we are in Turkey. So well done, everyone. You can stop typing now. We already flew there. But next it will be 4 because there are no more sites. So don't worry for the people that want to go to England. So the site that we're talking about now is called ÇATALHÖYÜK. And here, again, we're traveling in time. What's the red dot? I'm going to tell you later what's the red dot. Here we're traveling back in time. And if you look at the chronology here, we're actually 7,500 years before the Common Era, so before Christ. ÇATALHÖYÜK was one of the first city in human history. So we're looking at something that probably is, at the very beginning, 9,000 years old. So 9,000 years ago, that's when they started building this city. And if you think about our society as it is now, you probably know what it is, a city. Okay, so you live maybe in a village, or you live in a town which is slightly bigger, or you might have lived in a city which is a big one. And this was the very first one. So the very first city in human history was created in Turkey. The population was between 5,000 and 7,000. I know that nowadays these numbers won't qualify for a city. You know, you need way more people to actually qualify for a city. So if you have 5,000 people living somewhere, that would probably be, depending on also on the country in the world, you'll probably be between a village and a small town. But back then, there weren't that many people around. And so 5,000 to 7,000 people living all together in the same place, it was really, really a huge city. So the sites were set up as large number of buildings clustered together, and the inhabitants lived in mud brick houses. And what is very interesting about this site is that most of these houses were accessed by holes in the ceiling and some doors on the side of the houses. And then you had ladders and stairs that were going everywhere. So most of the buildings you would just go through from the roof, really, from the ceiling. You wouldn't have a door kind of at the ground level. And the rooftops, they were effectively streets. So you wouldn't have street in between the houses were all kind of packed together. And instead of having roads or streets around the house, you will just jump from one house to the next on the roof. Okay, so that sounds quite fun to me. And then again, it's a very strange thing if you think about it, because everywhere else we find villages and small cities and towns, they actually had an opening at the ground level. So this really was making all the archaeologists very curious. And these are some of the questions that they asked. So how and why was this created? How people lived? Why they decided to have, you know, the entrances on the rooftop? Why there were no streets? And also they found that there were only domestic buildings. So the next question will be why. So just take a moment to think about a city or your town or your village. I'm pretty sure that probably 99% of your places where you live, they will have not only houses, they will have a school, they might have a hospital, they might have a post office, they might have supermarkets. So that's what we mean. In this site, we couldn't find evidence of any other type of building. They might even have a city hall, which might be bigger than the rest of the houses, the churches, so as a religious place, or a mosque as another religious place, or a temple. They're usually bigger than the usual houses, so you kind of recognize them when you excavate a site. There is a house or a building that had a bigger importance. But in this site, we can only identify domestic buildings. Okay, so what did we learn from the excavation? And this is actually a quite nice drawing of one of the reconstruction of the house. You can see people are actually accessing from the roof, and they have a ladder all the way down, and then the house didn't actually have that many windows either, and it was closed on the 4 sides. So the archaeologists interpret this site as a strong evidence of an egalitarian society, and egalitarian just means that the people were equal. So where no houses that look different have been found so far. So you wouldn't have someone with a bigger house or a smaller house, or a house with a swimming pool compared to a house without a swimming pool. All the houses look the same. And it also appeared that there was little social distinction based on gender. So men, women, and children were receiving the same type of nutrition and had very similar social status. So again, we don't find a difference between men or women or children. And then houses and families were the most important part of the society, and everything happened in the house, and people were even buried underneath the house. As you can see here in the reconstruction, there are some skeletons being buried under the house. So people were kind of born in here, living here, and then when they were passed away, they were buried also under the house. So it seems like there was a very strong connection and very strong importance of the house as a building, but also as a symbol. Someone raise a hand, are you okay? It was just a mistake, probably. Okay, so now there's a question. The question is, ÇATALHÖYÜK is one of the first cities in the history of humanity. All the other population around them lived as hunter-gatherers at the time, which means that we're not growing plants to eat, didn't practice agriculture, they didn't farm animals, but they were going out to hunt and gather food. However, remains of pots have been analyzed and traces of cow milk have been found, indicated this sedentary society lived off A, trading with hunter-gatherers, B, farming and agriculture, C, hunting. So you can type your answer in the chat. All of the above. That's sneaky. It's not. There is only one. This seems to be a bit more difficult. Not everyone agrees on this one. So you just stopped copying each other. I don't know what it is. Could easily be A or B. Okay. You're a bit divided on this one. The other 2 questions you were just very clear. Okay, so let's see what is the right answer. B, farming and agriculture. So well done, everyone. Okay, so the last one. For all the people that have been typing 4 since the first since the first time, we're now finally going back to the UK. Okay, so I'm actually taking you to York. You should all know this place pretty well. How many of you have been to the Jorvik Museum? Yeah, I can see some movement. Yeah, you can nod, you can do whatever. You can type yes. Good. Okay, so lots of people have been to the Jorvik Museum. And this picture that you have in front of you here is actually the Jorvik excavation. So nowadays, over here, that's where the museum sits on top of the excavation. So this huge hall is now covered by the entire structure of the museum and also the shopping center that's nearby. But this is how the excavation looked when they actually started it in the 70s. And in terms of time traveling again, so we are traveling in kind of space, but also in time, we actually jumped forward about 7,000 years, and we are more or less looking at 800 to 900 of the present era. So this site really generated similar questions. So they knew that it was a Viking site, but archaeologists had lots of questions. So they were asking, when exactly did the Vikings arrive in York? Where were they from? Because we know that Vikings populated a very large area of Europe. So they wanted to know more of this specific population of Vikings that arrived all the way to York. How people lived. This is a very popular question that we often ask as archaeologists. And then why so many combs were found? Because they found hundreds of combs at this excavation. Okay, so let's see what they found out. And you have here on the right-hand side some pictures of some of the remains and some of the artifacts that are actually in the exhibition. So you should, you might recognize them. So the Vikings, they settled here, they farmed the land, they were great craftsmen, they were traders, artists, engineers, and shipbuilders. So really they had a wide range of professions. And all the industries were carried out in and around the front courtyard. So everything happened really in their own little house. So under the Vikings, Jorvik, which was the Viking name for York, developed as an important manufacturing center, which supplied a wide hinterland with a range of everyday items. So there were lots of industries happening in York, and then they were kind of exporting their objects and products that they were producing to the countryside area. So evidence from Jorvik demonstrate links with many parts of the world, and that's because you can see objects that are coming from different parts of the world buried in the excavation in York, including Norway, Germany, the Baltic, Uzbekistan, which is in Central Asia, and the Red Sea. So really they were trading with a wide range of places. Okay, time for the last quiz. York became an important river city with connections all over Europe during the Viking Age. How did the Viking do it? So how did they manage to make York such an important city? A, they forced people from abroad to trade with them. B, they were great sellers and traders, and they benefited from their connections with mainland Europe and existing contacts between different Viking groups. And C, the connections already existed, so they didn't really have to struggle that much. You can see some vote. Oh, it hasn't loaded for you yet. Looks like the majority of you can see the screen, so hopefully it will load. Everyone voted? Okay. Let's see. There's someone drawing on the presentation. B, okay. Yes, it is B, yeah. Well done, everyone. The majority of you got it right. Okay, so now for the person that wrote in the chat, what is the red dot for? The red dot is functioning with the hyperlink, pretty much with like the map to go back to the beginning. And this is to go straight back to the end. That's what it was for. Okay, so before we kind of wrap up, really, because I probably talked too much already, two slides on the main messages that I was trying to convey with this quiz and this game with you tonight. So what is archaeology telling us in this round-the-world tour that you came with me? Hopefully you managed to appreciate that all human culture that we saw tonight, but you can also, explore by yourself in future. They prove to be very resourceful, very inventive, creative, mobile. We've seen so many populations that were not local, so they were constantly moving around. Different, because you've seen how many different solutions they had for earthquake, for building houses with, kind of walking on the roofs rather than walking, in the streets around the houses, and very flexible. So they had solutions for whatever was the environment around them. And again, the most important superpowers of archaeology, I think, is quite, thank you for highlighting the title. So the most important superpower of archaeology, I think, is this one. So is making the world safe for human differences. So the more we study the past and the more we travel the world and we travel back in time to study past civilization, we realize how different they were, how inventive they were, how creative they were. It just makes you appreciate human differences. It makes you realize that really being different is, it kind of enrich your experience, rather than divide us. Okay, so this now looks like my notes for the talk. It doesn't look like a nice presentation anymore. Okay, so let's go to the end so you stop drawing. And then thank you for your attention. And now we can take questions. I will need you to unmute yourself in case you have a question that I can ask, that I can answer for you.
I have a question.
Yes.
For I think it was the third one where they the oldest civilization. How did like 5,000 to 7,000 people fit in that area? It didn't look very big.
Yeah, so the picture that I showed you, it was only a portion of the excavation, but actually, yeah, the area where the city was standing is actually quite extensive. It's quite big, and it is really impressive. There are some aerial pictures that they show you, from top, from a plane flying over, how big it was.
Wow.
I think the key also is that probably nowadays we'll have less people living per, in each house, because there are lots of people living by themselves. But back then there was such a strong link within each family that you probably had 10 people living in one house. So you wouldn't need, the same number of houses. If you have one person living in one house, you will need 5,000 houses. But if you have 10 people sharing the same house, obviously you need less houses. And also the funny thing about that site is that all the houses were literally kind of clustered together, like really attached one to the other. So I guess this was another way of saving space. not much, but yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Anyone else?
How do you know where to excavate?
How do I know?
How do you know where to excavate?
When or where?
Where?
Where? You can see it usually. So when you do excavate, sometimes you find things that are only, let's say, 30 centimeters or like this much below the surface. And sometimes you have to dig quite deep to get to the levels where you have, all the things preserved. So an excavation is technically a huge hole in the ground, and it's kind of impossible to miss it, once you do the excavation. But before you decide to excavate, we do what, it was the first superpower in the slide. It was geophysics. So it was the superpower of seeing through the soil. So there are a number of techniques that we can use to literally scan what's underneath our feet. And then we get a kind of it's a bit fuzzy, the image that you get is not very clear, but you can get kind of a nice kind of layout of the houses. You can get the presence of some other objects. And so that that's an area of interest. And then you start the excavation. And then, as I said, sometimes it's only, half a meter deep, and some other times it's like 3 meters below the ground, and you have to kind of dig really deep. Like the picture that you've seen in York was actually quite a deep excavation, which is why now when you go to Jorvik Museum, you actually go down the stairs. I don't know if you remember, but you have to go down the stairs for a couple of stairs. And that is because the level of the city at the time, it was actually much, much deeper. Yeah, I think I can see someone else. Ellie, yes? Yeah, you need, yeah, hi.
What's your favorite place that you've excavated in?
Excavate, oh, my favorite place. That's a very difficult question. I think my favorite place. Okay, so I have two answers. My favorite place for the place is probably Brazil. So I got to go to Brazil to excavate, and it was amazing to have the opportunity to go to Brazil and visit the country as well as doing my work there. But then my favorite excavation, it was in Italy, and it was my first one. I was a student in archaeology, and I went for my first excavation in my first year, and it was incredible. It was so many objects. We found swords, we found shields, we found vases, we found beads and necklaces and rings, and I have never, ever in my career after that excavated such a beautiful site. And the most funny thing is that because I was a first year student, I didn't know that wasn't normal. I just thought, you know, all the excavation are so rich, and once you dig a hole somewhere, you have all these objects and jewels, you know, coming out a bit like a treasure. It was a bit naive of me. And I thought, all the excavation from now on are going to be like this, and it's going to be so great. And then obviously it's not always like this. Sometimes you excavate a lot and you don't find many objects. So I think my very first excavation was probably my favorite one, even though I didn't know at the time. But yeah, I can see Ellie raising her hand. You can just unmute yourself and ask what you would like to ask.
Like, which places have you like spent the most time working in?
You mean excavating, like digging? Yeah. Probably Portugal. I spent a lot of time in Portugal, and Brazil probably would be next. And yeah, and Italy. I think these three. Blake?
What in the third place? What were the like big blocks at the back of the picture?
Wait. Number three. Which ones? These ones? These blocks?
Yeah, them ones at the back.
Yeah.
What are they?
These ones are, I think they are just, let me see. I think these ones are just at the very back. They are like bags of sand to kind of make it stable for the excavation not to crumble over. And that is because it's not, so all these houses are made of mud bricks. They were not cooked. So it's not like a cooked brick that is actually quite stable and hard. It's basically just mud like put together. So what happened is that the structure, obviously 7,000 years later, is going to crumble. It's not going to have the same kind of, you know, hardness that you have for a brick that is cooked. So like the usual, you know, red brick is red because it's been cooked. If you don't cook it, it's just, it has the color of, you know, clay, which is the sort of earth soil color. And so if you do it like that, then, you know, if you excavate and you go quite deep, it might just literally fall on top of you. So I think these are just, yeah, literally bags of sands to make sure that they keep, you know, the walls up.
Okay.
Sorry, it's not a very exciting answer, but yeah. And then we have Maria.
What subjects do you have to choose to become an archaeologist, or what are the best ones to choose?
That's an interesting question. We actually have people that come to archaeology as undergrads from, well, at least at York, I know that they accept all sorts of A-levels because as you can see, all the different superpowers that I was talking about, they're actually bringing in so many different fields and so many different specialties. So there are some people that come from humanities, so the people coming from history, lots of people that come from history because they're interested, you know, in the past, but also people coming from literature, people that, you know, like kind of the humanities in general. But we also have people that like science a lot. So for example, in my case, I started being more just coming from history, and I was just interested in history. And then I discovered that actually I wasn't too bad at science either. And it was really nice to apply some of the science I knew, so biology and chemistry, to archaeology. And for me, it was the perfect match because I liked a lot both history and also the sciencey subjects. And I said, oh, I can actually apply the two. And the name that we usually give to this field is bioarchaeology. So it's biology and chemistry applied to archaeology. It's just bio as bio. And so I would say, really, if you are well into the past, so you have to have an interest in history at least. But then you can kind of decide if you are into science. You can also do, for example, DNA analysis. You can do the type of analysis that I do for diet. You can look at migration. So yeah, it really is a wide range, and we're very happy to have all sorts of people. Okay, Eden, I think is the next one. Eden, Alison, is it?
Oh,
Yeah.
what period of bones are you looking at now?
So I excavated many prehistoric sites, so probably a lot of it was Iron Age, so about 2,000 years ago. And then now I'm working on Brazil, and it's a very big project that's going to take 5 years. So we have a lot of time, but it's also very ambitious. So we're looking from 4,000 years ago all the way to the last century, so 19th century. So it's a huge chronology, and so many things happened in this, past 4,000 years. So yeah, but personally, I also been working a lot on the Middle Ages, which is a period that I like a lot. So I kind of started with prehistory because I was really fascinated by the most ancient, parts of the story and history. And then as I don't know, went along my career, I was kind of interested more into the historical period. So I don't know, a bit of the Romans and then a bit of the Middle Ages. And now in Brazil, we're also going all the way to the 19th century. So quite kind of modern, more modern archaeology. So yeah, that you can really choose. And if you get bored, you just change century, and you can study something else. Okay, I think I don't have any more raised hands. I don't know if there's anyone that wants to.
Hi, it's Maria.
Hi.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
How certain can you be when about what people ate when you do the tests?
Yeah, so unfortunately, we cannot be super specific, but we have about 4 groups of food that we can identify in the bones, and those are animal protein, so basically meat, but also dairies, so anything that comes from an animal, so meat or cheese or yogurt or milk, eggs. So all of these are quite easy to see, to identify. And then the other groups of food that we can see very well is fish. Very easy to see because it has very specific carbon and nitrogen values, which are those 2 elements that I was mentioning at the very beginning that we use for paleo diet reconstruction. So fish looks really different. And then we can tell apart 2 families of plants. One family is the majority of the plants and the fruit that you can think of, so it's not very useful. But then the other family of plants that we can see includes sugar cane. So sugar, if you eat a lot of sugar, you should we can spot you. And then there's also corn, and then some other plants like millet or sorghum, which probably you are not familiar with, but they are very similar to corn, and they have again very distinct values. So these are the main 4 groups of food that we can tell apart.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. We cannot see chocolates, or we cannot see very specific foods, but we can infer like how much sugar or how much protein there was in your diet. Anyone else?
What's the strangest thing that you've ever found?
The strangest thing. I don't know about strangest, but there was one that was very cute. And it was one of the excavation that it was a cemetery. It was an Iron Age cemetery, so again about 2,000 years old. And we excavated a baby bottle, so for feeding babies. So nowadays the bottles obviously are in plastic. Yeah, so I think all of you are probably familiar with how it looks like if you have any brothers or sisters or cousins, you know, someone that is small around you. It's just the typical, you know, plastic baby bottle that babies used to drink milk from. And in the past, do you know what sort of shape would it have, or what sort of materials would it made of? Anyone? They didn't have plastic in the Iron Age, you know, so they had to come up with something else. What do you think they used?
The wood.
No, maybe, but we cannot find wood because it gets destroyed. So maybe wood, but we wouldn't see it. What else? They can preserve quite well. Anyone? It's just pottery, ceramic, just pots. So it's clay that is used to, you know, make the dishes, or, you know, sorry, dishes, that making plates, and all the vessels that you have in your place at home. I'm sure you have some plates that are made of ceramic. And so they were using clay to make all sorts of objects, and also baby bottles. And if you want to know how do we know there was baby bottle, it's because it was round, very small. It looked a bit like a teapot because it had, you know, like a thingy. So instead of the teapot, you know, where the tea comes out, so like the beak, it had a very similar one, and it was just perfect kind of shape and size for a baby mouth. So, and we know this, we found them in several sites, and so we know that those ones are baby bottles. But yeah, it was my first one. I never excavated any other baby bottles after that, and yeah, I think it was quite cute. I was like, oh, a baby bottle.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else?
What's the most common thing that you find
On the excavation?
Yeah.
So usually archaeologists are literally overwhelmed by pottery, as I just said, because it's a quite durable material, so it lasts for many centuries. And I would assume that many of the objects were actually made of wood, but we don't have in all the sites the specific conditions for wood to preserve. So the majority of the objects that we have preserved are made of pottery. And then the second most common finding is actually animal remains. And that is because, again, it's scrap food, you know, scrap domestic food. As I said, you know, people were leaving their rubbish after they had their meals a bit everywhere around. So we found lots of that as well.